Um, how's everyone in chat doing? Thank you for all the happy birthday messages. That is very kind. Um, oh, I was deaf because I switched on to the just picture one. Anyway, we're back. Um, sorry. Thanks everyone. I was just saying. I think I might. I was just showing off these balloons. Some of it's green, and I might hide them for the rest of the stream because otherwise they'll be like in the background for the whole time for the next like week's worth of videos. Um, yeah, there's no audio without the background because of the way I've set it up. Like all these things include different things. Like I just wanted it so I could just click a couple of buttons and everything works, and it does. But if I want to like deconstruct it, then um, it's a bit more of a challenge. Youngin, thanks for everyone in chat who thinks I'm young. um, oh, we've got a very kind super chat here, 20 Australian dollars from Jazz. Happy birthday. Thank you very much, Jazz. That is very kind of you. I've actually got some birthday cake downstairs in the fridge waiting for me as well. So that'll be my after show snack. Oh, Vito's saying I'm 36. You look about 21 or 22. Thank you very much. I think there's like 4 factors that play into that. One is good makeup, and one is good studio lighting. But also people do say that to me in real life. And I think I've heard a lot of trans women express similar things, that like when you basically do puberty again and like you de-age for a bit before you start aging again. So maybe it's just one of the, like, trans people have a pretty tough lot in life. So if we get to just look 5 years younger than we really are, you know, it's just a little small like payback for all the horrors that has been thrust upon us by the universe. So that's something. And the final factor is, I think that's just always been the case for me. People have always said that I look young, even before I transitioned. People seem to think I look a bit younger than I was. So a gift. I haven't. So I was ID'd at least one time when I was 35. So that's I'm hanging on to that. Let's now the race begins again. I've got 360 days, or however many it is, and to get ID'd again. So if you work in like Tesco or whatever, and you see me and I'm buying the wine or something, ID me. It make me feel better. um, Someone's saying here, people think I look younger now, but I never got ID'd as an adult prior to transitioning, so I certainly didn't before. Interesting, Vela. Look one, look younger with this one weird trick. Yeah, exactly. All you've got to do, right? Quite easy. Just medically transition, which, according to the gender criticals, is both simultaneously absolutely nothing and has no effect on your body at all, and ruins your entire life and mutilates you beyond all repair. So, yeah, that's all you got to do. Mutilate yourself beyond repair, just like me. Obviously, that's what any rational person would say on seeing me. um, but yeah, I mean, I guess we'll hide these balloons because otherwise it's going to be a bit weird for all the videos. I don't know. But yeah, I talking of the videos, it's like it's been over a month now since I put out a video every single day on YouTube, just from clips of this stream, and it seems to be doing quite well. Some of them have got nearly 10,000 views, so that's pretty good. A few of them have significantly less than that, but that's, to be expected. But yeah, I'm always willing to hear feedback on this. Like, if we think that there should be less, I don't really want to do more than one a day because it's a bit much, but or if we think that they could be better edited or something. It is a lot of work. Like, I'm pushing quite hard to do I have a real job too. I work a normal 9 to 5 job. And then I also have a hobby, several hobbies, and like a family and stuff. And then on top of that, I do this. So, yeah, it's a bit of a quest. Yeah, my birthday was Saturday. For everyone asking who wasn't here from the start to see the tech issues. Yeah, it was Saturday, the 22nd, the first real full day of spring. Often best birthday to have. Also, I feel like 1989 is the best year to be born in, right? Because you were born in the 80s, coolest decade to be born in, but you you're like as young as you possibly can be, because like some people you meet are born in the 80s, basically 200 years old, but me still spring chicken. So that's why 1989 is the best. um John saying, so many great shows today. Thanks, Katie. Hurry up and come to the States and jam. The airfare will be cheap on the return since we're deporting everyone. Happy birthday. Yeah, well, I don't feel like getting deported back to your home country is the worst case anymore. Because, like, previously, with the US has always had kind of strict entry requirements. And if you, like, spelt your name wrong on your entry form, you could easily fly all the way there and then be denied and have to come all the way back. And that would have been terrible in the context of a more sane world. But now it's like you might spell your name wrong on your visa, turn up, and then get deported to El Salvador and put in a torture prison. So I don't think I'll be taking the risk when they seem to be targeting trans people of traveling to the USA in the next some years. Yeah, lots of people saying they wouldn't travel to the US at the moment. Where are these earrings from? These were a gift. I actually think they were a gift for my birthday last year. Maybe. I'm not sure where they're from. So, yes, I really like them. They're nice, something. Someone's saying here, can confirm I was born in 81 and I'm ancient now. Happy birthday, Katie. Yeah, see, exactly. Even people born in 88, they're just like, I mean, how old does it make you if you're born in 1988? 64, I think. So, it's a big jump between 88 and 89. So, Donald Trump is a massive problem to a sane world. That is very true. We do need to reduce the number of Donald Trumps in the world. That isn't a threat. That's a joke about what Helen Joyce said. And if you think that is a threat, then you also logically think that Helen Joyce threatened trans people. So, yeah, there is. We don't need any more Donald Trumps in the world. I think that's something we can all agree on. Officially cancelled. I've been cancelled so many times. No, I haven't really. Like, this is something I wanted to talk about one time. I don't think I'm going to go into it now because I need to plan what I was going to say better. But I have had a few, like, what looks like cancellings before in the past, in the last 10 years on Twitter. It's like, you anger a lot of people by doing something dumb, and then you think about it and learn a bit about it, and then you come back and you're like, you know what? I messed up here. Here's the stuff I've learned. And everyone, well, 99% of the people who are angry will be like, oh, thanks. And it's like over. I guess the other option is you double down and you become a, like, Daily Wire employee or something. But it just, I don't know. From my experience of it, it's not that, it wasn't bad. But I also know that some other people have, I know ContraPoints had a very rough time of it. And maybe it was like 200,000 times worse than what I experienced. So, I can't really dismiss all of it. But anyway, right, perhaps we will get onto the thing. What shall I do about these balloons? What do you think? Shall I keep them in all the videos for the whole week? And then, I mean, with their, like, slightly see-through. No, maybe that'll be fun. Let's just do it. Then I'll get happy birthday messages for a whole week. Yeah, right. So, the first thing I was going to talk about is, this is pretty good. Teenage trans activists confront Wes Streeting. So, there's a group of British trans kids who are fighting back against the bullshit that's being inflicted upon trans children in the UK by the government, by Wes Streeting, who is our Minister for Health. And they are called Trans Kids Deserve Better. And we've talked about them a few times on this show. They, I think they're the group who released a load of locusts in the LGB Alliance conference, maybe? But they are the group, definitely, who have been making paper coffins and putting them outside Wes Streeting's office to represent the children that his policies have contributed to harming and killing. And they've been doing that for a long time. We've got a quote here from one of them. But they managed to actually confront him this time. Like, hand him a coffin. So let's just read this article a little bit. So, two young activists from Trans Kids Deserve Better confronted Wes Streeting. The Action Network have left a paper coffin outside his office in Ilford for 200 days. So every single day for 200 days, they've put coffins outside his office, which is, like, by the way, these kids are amazing, like, legendary. To have the guts to do this, and the, like, drive to do it is incredible. So good on them, like, full support. For 200 days since he announced that the puberty blocker ban would continue. Today, foregoing the regular coffin drop, one activist went up and personally handed Wes a coffin, reading, "Could you bear to look us in the eye and tell us that you'll let us die?" Another activist stood up and addressed him directly, saying, "Wes Streeting, every day Trans Kid Deserves Better drops a coffin off at your constituency. You accept £175,000 from private donations, yet you deny trans kids a voice. Instead, you value the opinions of 8 anti-trans groups. When banning puberty blockers, you interact with parents who believe in abusing us, showing them your support and sympathy. Why not us? Listen to us. Our lives are on the line." Before they could finish, a member of the audience reached over the chair, trying to pull him down. One of the activists in a statement said, "I am partaking in this action because I am tired of Wes Streeting ignoring the community he directly affects with his actions. Wes refuses to even look children in the eyes as he takes away our rights, our hope, and our fucking dignity. Trans healthcare is life-saving. This is a fact, and it's been proven time and time again. However, Wes chooses to ignore this. Over trans people, he continuously values the opinions of groups that wish to eradicate the existence of genderqueer kids. He does not care about us suffering. He only wishes to grow his popularity as opposed to support his community as a gay man. He is killing trans kids in the name of his image, and I refuse to let this happen without consequences." So, incredible statements in general, full stop. These are, like, strong protest actions and very well-written, constructive statements. But they also happen to come from the kids who are directly affected by these policies. When all of this anti-trans rights horror happens in the abstract, like it's happening in another country, or it affecting trans people who aren't you, or maybe you're a cis person, that is horrible enough and is stressing enough to confront these ghouls who are in charge. But when it affects you directly, it's way more stressful. Like, any of these news items that come out, when they directly affect me personally, it's way more stressful than when they don't. And that, I think that's just the reality of anything. So these kids, knowing that these rulings are directly harming them, having the guts to, like, confront him is crazy. And then, like, crazy good, crazy strong. And then to have the, like, articulation to come out with statements this good, yeah, incredible. This group is amazing. They do have a website. I'm on their website, Trans Kids Deserve Better. They do have a support button. So their contact has, "I am a trans youth, 17 and under, trans adult, cis ally to trans youth, or transphobe. May not be contacted." So, got a sense of humor too. That's because trans kids are just normal kids. They are constantly talked about but never to, and they're constantly talked over, and they're treated like aliens, basically, like simultaneously, like dangerous, damaged, broken, as well as like led astray, vulnerable, not even knowing their own minds. And they're none of those things. They're just normal kids. And kids have a sense of humor. Kids have a lot of guts. Kids are clearly able to write good speeches. Um, so yeah, good on them. But talking of Wes Streeting's popularity, actually, I didn't get this up, but I should get it up, seeing as they directly mention it. Um, there was recently a poll of Labour Party members, um, asking which Labour politicians they liked the least and the most. And here it is. Our friend Wes did not do very well. So, for anyone who's not in the UK, here is a bunch of Labour politicians. Labour is meant to be the centre-left party, and that's who we have in charge now. Though, seemingly, they did just recently announce something that looked quite good in being pro-union, but every other single thing they've done has been like just the same as the previous far-right government that we had in power. They continued the attacks, escalated the attacks on trans people and LGBT people in general. They've launched a whole new wave of attacks on disabled people and the old people. They've been like taking away old people who can't afford to heat their own houses. They've been taking away the money they get from the government to do that. Disgusting. Anyway, here's our centre-left party, and this is what... So it says a survey of Labour members, favourability of various cabinet members. So the cabinet members are the more important ones. So Keir Starmer is here plus 13, so something, but he's on the lower end. The top one is a guy called Ed Miliband, who at one point was in charge of the Labour Party and who ran to be Prime Minister and lost. Maybe he was a bit unfairly attacked by the media, but he did lose. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of people. There's people here I haven't even heard of, so presumably that means they have kept their heads down a bit on all of these garbage policies. But here we go, fourth from the bottom. Bearing in mind that Rachel Reeves is currently very hated, like across the board, for her disastrous budget stuff. So, like, I think she's probably artificially deflated here. And when all of the stuff she's doing, like if she gets fired or if she quits or changes it, I think she would go up in the rankings, maybe. Who knows? But what she's doing now is horrific. But then, the only ones below Wes Streeting are Lord Hermer and Liz Kendall. So, it's good to see that he is tanking in his popularity. He's very unpopular amongst Labour voters. That is good, because for a while I was worried that he might be the next Labour leader. Still not impossible, but I mean, to be honest, the people running the Labour Party at the moment are so terrible that they could easily just pick like the bottom four to be the next people in charge. But anyway, Wes Streeting is generally disliked. He actually only won his constituency by 500 votes, when the totals are like, tens of thousands. So he was very close to not even having a seat. And now he's like, what has he done other than flag that he might make the NHS private and attack trans children? That's like his only things. Well, actually, there's one other thing. We're going to come to him later, but it's also negative. So, yeah, I feel like it's a massive L for Wes that he's one of the most disliked Labour politicians. But it's also a little bit of an L for us that he's got a positive rating. I think we need to do more telling people about how bad Wes Streeting is, because he's absolute ghoul. Like, he is instrumental in this government's attack on trans people, as we will see later on in this show as well. Or in a later video, if you're watching this in the clip. Yeah, he is a very vile person who is causing great harm to LGBT people. What do you guys all think of Wes Streeting? Who here likes Wes Streeting? I know I go on about him a lot, but that's just because he's such a awful person who is causing so much harm based on what? Nothing. Just his hatred of LGBT people. Yeah, disgusting. Yeah, Labour of 2025, or I guess 2023, 20. I don't know. Labour for a few years have been centre right, maybe even just right, on the political spectrum. But like traditionally, or at least when I was born in 1989, they were centre left, or they have been centre left at least at points during my lifetime. Um, Maybe for a little while with Jeremy Corbyn, they were just like left. Um, but yeah, they've definitely slipped right. I don't know why lots of the. I mean, there's lots of reasons why the like neoliberal parties are all moving right wing. Um, but it's odd that Labour still think it's a good strategy, when it seems to just be going terribly for them and terribly for the country. So, talking of political parties, the next thing I wanted to talk about was this. So, Belfast Pride have banned political parties from the parade. Belfast has become the latest organisation to prevent political parties who supported a ban on the sale or supply of puberty blockers to under 18s from taking part in its parade. In December, the four parties in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin, DUP, Alliance, and Ulster Unionist Party, voted to introduce the ban, so they are all now banned from Pride. In a statement from Belfast Pride, they said Belfast Pride is deeply concerned about the impact this decision has had and will have on young trans people. Organisers says it was what was universal in responses to its consultation was anger and frustration expressed at the decision to ban puberty blockers in Northern Ireland because there was no justification for it. Because the previous Conservative government picked someone who had no idea anything, like has no experience with, no knowledge about trans people at all, did a independent review of trans healthcare, literally just threw out all of the evidence, like barely with any excuse to doing so at all, and then just said, oh yeah, well, there's no evidence for puberty blockers. But still, even that review wasn't able to say we should ban puberty blockers or we should do conversion therapy. And then since the author of the report has said those things, and now that's just like, that was all like some right-wing anti-LGBT bullshit. And then this government takes over, and then suddenly that's like, well, we're going to carry on causing as much suffering to trans people as possible. And it's because of, guess who? Our favourite, Wes Streeting. He is pushing this through. Him and his like gang of planners and schemers in the government. Anyway, the idea that Labour should be welcome at Pride or any of these parties in Northern Ireland, the idea that any of them should be welcome at Pride is ridiculous. Like, of course they shouldn't. The entire point of Pride is to protest against the oppression of LGBT people and to celebrate our lives in the face of people trying to stop us from living them. Like, Pride is a party and it is a celebration, but it's not just like a party and a celebration for the sake of it. It's a party and celebration saying, we're still here. You've tried to get rid of us, but you haven't succeeded. You trying to ruin our lives, and yet we're here living good, happy lives in spite of that. That is a core part of Pride, but like that itself is a protest. That's a protest against it's a protest against the people who are trying to stop us from living our lives. But the actual whole thing, like it all came from actual protests, actual riots, fights against the police who were trying to crack down. I don't like the phrase crack down, but like trying to just stop, crack down on LGBT people's lives, trying to stop LGBT people from just existing. And for a while, like when gay marriage was introduced and stuff by the government, to some degree, well, the politicians who are instrumental in that should be at Pride, or at least not banned from it, or at least would maybe themselves feel like they should be welcomed at Pride, because they, they weren't fighting against LGBT people's lives, and they were contributing to making them more equal. And politicians and political parties making an appearance at Pride became like a thing. Like, that happened every single year. You often see pictures. There's a picture of let's see if I can find it. There's a picture of Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. Here we go. At Pride, holding flipping trans flags and wearing and there's Annalise Dodds. Like, so here are the most powerful members of the Labour government, including our actual leader of our whole country, at Camden Pride just recently, 2022. And then pretty much since this moment onwards, they've just been the oppressors. They've been the people that Pride exists to protest against. And so, of course, they're not welcome. I think any Pride that welcomes these people is like a sham. Like, the people don't attend a Pride that welcomes the Labour Party, because the Labour Party is oppressing trans people. It's oppressing LGBT people. Taking away the futures of children. It's not just some like mild disagreement about tax or some loophole in the marriage law where gay marriage and straight marriage aren't quite equal, but they're equal in 99% of cases. This is literally like hurting children. And more, Wes Streeting still seems to be trying to remove more trans people's rights. So yeah, of course these people aren't welcome. And like, I've seen several of the comments saying, oh, I hope they get milkshaked or whatever. Obviously, I'm not gonna like recommend that or support that in any way, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, if they went to one of these events. That I don't think the Labour Party realizes how much anger there is against them from the LGBT community. Like, I fucking hate them. I don't think I'm an outlier in that. Like, what they're doing is disgusting, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down or stopping. So yeah, I mean, the whole point in these politicians attending these events is to get like a PR thing, like, oh, we support the LGBT community, vote for us. But they don't. So don't let them have those votes. Don't let them have that like fake cover. If you see any of them, at least, like, don't do anything ridiculous. Don't get arrested. Don't harm them. But go and tell them your mind for sure. Boo them, definitely. Yeah, just ridiculous. So I'm glad they're banned from Belfast Pride, and they should be banned from all prides. Someone talking here about moving to Canada. I will say this: if Canada were willing to take me in, private move benefits equivalent to what I get here, I could just walk to Canada. But moving to Canada isn't the solution. Yeah, I think that sometimes people are like, oh, it's getting bad in your country, just move to another country. And they don't realize how, firstly, extreme that is. It's like, you need to find a new job, and you need to build a new support network, and you need to find somewhere to live. You need to be able to pay all your bills. You need to deal with the entry system, the visas, like all this kind of stuff. Being an asylum seeker is terrible. You just have way less freedom and protections and rights to do anything. And if you're not an asylum seeker, you need just a lot of money to be able to move to a different country. Like the person in chat saying, even if you could just walk there, like, even if you could walk there and like you lived in a caravan or something, just living on the other side of a border just is not something you can just do, or not something that most people can do. And for sure, I know that some trans people and LGBT people in general are fleeing the USA or fleeing certain states or fleeing even the UK. I know a few trans people have moved out the UK in the last few years because they have the means to, and it's not, things are not heading in the right direction, certainly in the US. But they are people who have the means to, like, they can do it. It's, yeah. So Domini in chat saying an incredibly privileged to be able to just up sticks and skip the country. Yeah, definitely. And I'm not shaming people who do that. Like, if you are someone in a position where, like, maybe you have a trans kid and you have a good enough family situation where you can move to a country where your kid's going to grow up happier and healthier and more supported and safe than if they were to live in the UK, good. Like, good for you. Do it. You cannot feel guilty. You have to survive and live your own life first. And in doing that, you will be creating a like financially and mentally more stable child who is more likely to then be able to contribute to fighting for trans rights around the world in the future. But I think the thing that we need to push back on is people thinking that just anyone can do it, because I mean, most people cannot, especially trans people who are way more likely to be homeless, to already not have the correct documents, to already be stigmatized, already find it harder to get a job because of prejudice. So yeah, if you can do it and you need to do it, then do it, and good for you. And I don't think you're a traitor or a coward or anything like that. But don't assume everyone else can do it. And if you're a random cis person in, like, a country that is fairly legit, like New Zealand or Canada, don't be like, oh, just move here, it'll be fine, we'll look after you, because I'm sure the entry requirements to your country, even though they won't be as ridiculous as some, are still not easy. Yeah, see, it's happening already. I'm getting the birthday questions. Yes, it was my birthday on Saturday. It's going to be in all the comments and everything for all these videos, isn't it? It's fine. It's fine. So I'm trying to split up news. There's not much good news this week, to be honest. Maybe like one thing, which is part of actually a negative story. And then we've got some rants to break it up, or like discourses or things I want to talk about, and it's my show, so you just got to deal with it or just go somewhere else. I don't know. Please keep watching. But I think some of the rant segments seem to do quite well as like standalone videos, so maybe people are interested in them. But so what we're going to talk about now, we're going to do a little rant about, is I don't like the term gender affirming care. So I did a little thread about this recently on Blue Sky. You can follow me on Blue Sky if you like. It is a bit lame reading out your own tweets, but I think it's a good starting point. So this was inspired by Parker Malloy, who is great, a journalist from the USA who you should all go follow. They've said, one thing I always roll my eyes at is when people will say things like, no one tell Elon Musk that his hair plugs are also a form of gender-affirming care. Checkmate. I see something like this in the replies to almost any post about attempts to take healthcare away from trans people, and I don't get it. You're not going to gotcha your way into them not trying to oppress trans people. They don't care about specific medical procedures. They just hate trans people and don't want them to exist. Plus, it trivializes the importance of healthcare access for trans people when you compare it to something someone just chooses to get done because they're super vain. I wish people would knock that shit off. And so I agree with everything Parker said here. Like, people like Elon Musk, the gender criticals, the transphobes, they don't care. They don't care even if they were, like, they're banning puberty blockers for trans kids, but not for cis kids. They are trying to stop trans people accessing things like hair transplants or laser hair removal when they think cis people should be able to do that. And you can be like, oh, isn't that hypocritical of you? Yes. They don't care. They hate you. Totally agree with Parker. But I also think, and it kind of motivated me to comment on this, not at all a disagreeing with Parker here. But I think the term gender affirming care kind of gives like vaguely middle of the road, slightly positive, slightly supportive trans people, cis people, like room to do these dumb takes, and it hides what trans healthcare is, and it hides like the oppression angle, which is like the core part of all of this discussion. So I've said, to quote me, I said, I hate the term gender affirming healthcare. I'm not getting surgery or whatever because I feel the need to be affirmed. It's to address dysphoria. I get affirmation from my friends, family, colleagues, etc. because they're nice, normal people, but also because it gives room for this kind of bullshit. Trans healthcare is good, descriptive, and politically important. They are coming for trans people. They're trying to stop trans people having healthcare. They want to wipe us out. This isn't about them attacking affirmation or gendered care. So, you like an example of this too would be like breast augmentation. Plenty of cis women, like 99.9% of all the people who have had breast augmentation have been cis women, or boob job, or whatever you want to call it. Some trans women have too, and they want to ban trans women from being able to do that, but they encourage cis women to do it. Like, it's usually the same people. And you could say, oh, that's gender affirming care. Maybe if you take this away, it'll blah, blah, blah. And there's a few problems with that. One is trying to compare something like, for example, Elon Musk's hair transplant with one based for dysphoria reasons, I think does trivialize the value of it for trans people. Like, there is a fuzzy line between these things. There's not this like clear difference between physical changes that are for like vanity and physical changes that are for like addressing dysphoria, because sometimes they're more one than the other, sometimes they're both at the same time, sometimes they're all one, sometimes all the other. For example, some trans women will get facial feminization surgery, and they're like, what I try to do is I tried to pick somewhere which just did it in like the scientific way and worked out which parts of we know which parts of a person's bone structure will grow during male puberty, and basically reverse that. Like, you get a stronger brow ridge, you get like stronger jawline, and you can basically just, those bits of bone just like grow during puberty, and you can basically just chisel them off, and then all of a sudden people read subconsciously your face as a woman's face instead of a man's face. And I know trans women who have done that and then been like, well, if I'm already having surgery on my face, I might as well look prettier too, right? So then they also say, can you also make me look beautiful as well as make me look female? And some doctors will do that, and that, that's fine. But there is two components to that. There's like the dysphoria side of it, which is like undo the things that make me read subconsciously to myself and others as this sex rather than the others, whatever, other ones. And that's one component. And another component is like beauty standards and stuff. And what I don't like about gender affirming care as a term is it kind of blurs those two things together, because there are just things that human brains are like hardwired to recognize as male and female very quickly. Like, it's proper lizard brain stuff. And there are things that humans in a culture generally have a similar opinion of what makes someone beautiful or not, but that's very subjective. Like, these are different things. They often get blended together. Often it's, the more feminine a woman is, the more beautiful she's considered, and the more masculine a man is, the more handsome he's considered. Generally, those things go together, but not always. But if you have a beard, you are going to read as male in a billionth of a second to most people. And that's like not so subjective. There is subjectiveness to like sexing people too. because it's wrapped up in beauty standards. But when you say gender affirming care, it almost feels like you're saying that being beautiful or like handsome is part of the motivation for this. Like it's just a vanity thing. Like the reason that you're getting surgery on your face is the same reason that like a Hollywood celebrity might do, just to look more pretty and stuff. And it just isn't. Like, not just in my opinion, but like factually it is not. um Changing how your brain interprets the sex markers on your body just reduces, you know, dysphoria. If you address those aspects of your body, your face, um which read as male or female to yourself and to other people, if you change those things, then your dysphoria goes down. That's like the whole thing, and that's like a measurable part to transitioning, and it's where the improvement in trans people's mental health often comes from. And sure, there's other things too, like being read into society as a man or as a woman or as a non-binary person, etc., which does contribute to that too. But when it comes to like physical dysphoria, that's what it's about. And yeah, I think it hides the importance of it to just wrap it all up in one thing, and it's the same as cis people doing it. But also it really feels like the term gender affirming care really feels like one of these things where they've like tried to make it sound nice. Like when people I don't like the term bottom surgery. Partly because I'm British and bottom means your bum or your ass or your whatever you Americans call it, hiney, I don't know. And I didn't get surgery on my bottom. But also because it's just like hiding what it is. Like what they're doing is genital reassignment surgery, genital reconfiguration, recombobulation surgery. I mean, vaginoplasty if you must. But it just seems like trying to make things nice for the sake of it. But then it's got the word gender in there, which also makes things a little bit confusing, because what you're doing with trans healthcare is changing your sex. You're like changing your actual physical sex characteristics. You're changing your hormones. You're changing your face structure. You're changing your genitals. You're changing your gonads. You know, core physical aspects of your biology are changing. Whereas when you say gender affirming, it's almost like, well, a haircut can be gender affirming, can't it? So it just kind of gives cis people this idea that they're the same thing. Like, oh yeah, it must be so nice and affirming to finally be able to wear the clothes you want. Well, yeah, it is. That's great. Oh, it must be exactly the same thing as having the genitals you want. It's just not really in the same ballpark. Someone in chat saying, let's all start a rumor that Katie got BBL for her birthday. The gender criticals have decided that I've had way more surgeries than I have. They are all convinced, because Graham Linehan said it, that I've had cheek implants, which I haven't. These are my real, normal, biological, grown from birth cheekbones. But if I had cheek implants, I would tell people, because I don't mind. Like I've been totally open about all the surgery I've had, which is just 2 surgeries, by the way. But anyone who's had more, good for them. And probably the main reason I haven't had BBL is because it's terrifying and expensive, and I don't really know if I need it. It's definitely causing me dysphoria, but like, kind of live without it. I don't know. But anyway, it's not on my list of things to do. But like that is considered a form of gender affirming healthcare, and it's something that most of the people getting it are cis women. And it's a good example of the last reason why I don't like the term gender affirming healthcare is the fact that women generally feel the need to get things like BBL, which, for anyone who doesn't know, BBL is Brazilian butt lift. Not sure why it's Brazilian. Presumably it started in Brazil, or anyway. It's an incredibly dangerous procedure as far as medical procedures go. I'm not trying to fearmongering about it. Obviously, most people who have it are fine. Um, but it's more dangerous than, say, like FFS. It's more dangerous than lots of things. Um, but the fact that like most women feel the need to get it isn't dysphoria related. It's like this horrific society's expectations of what women should look like, pressure for people to look like Instagram models, um, pressure on Instagram models themselves to just look more and more extreme, and it's like a form of like hyper femininity. And obviously globally at the moment, humans as a species are having this panic about sex differences, which is driven partially by trans people and partially by intersex people, and the rise of fascism, which always it wants to emphasize gender differences. Um, but those pressures aren't a good thing. Like the fact that people, like young girls, feel the need to get breast augmentation or have BBL or something, like that's bad. That's a failure of society. The fact that like if you've had it and you're trans or cis, um I, I'm not judging you at all. Good for you. If it's made your life better, then that's a good thing. I don't want to ban it. I don't want to make it illegal. I don't want to take it away from people. I'm not Wes Streeting. I don't want to harm other people. What I want to do is say, why the hell is society pressuring like young girls even and women to change their body to fit some ridiculous standard of beauty, which, by the way, unlike having a strong brow ridge or a beard or something, which are very strong sex indicators that most people's brains read instantly across culture, across time, things like having a big bum or big lips or big boobs or whatever are only in fashion sometimes. And they happen to be very fashionable at the moment, but they won't be fashionable forever. In the past, it was seen as like super feminine and attractive to be overweight. And then it was to be super skinny. Like when I was a kid, the ideal woman was like a stick, according to all of the like sexist magazines and stuff. And now that's changed to being super curvy, and it will probably change back. There was even a time when having like black teeth was seen as attractive because the Queen of England had black teeth because she ate loads of sugar and didn't brush her teeth properly or whatever, or didn't, maybe toothbrushes weren't even invented. And that was like seen as attractive for a while, and now it obviously very much is not. It's the same of having a tan. Like for a long time, having a tan was seen as a working class thing and thus unattractive. And then all of a sudden, rich people were able to afford to go on holidays to hot countries, and suddenly having a tan was seen as attractive. So, like, the fact that there is these pressures to change their bodies permanently to meet some kind of ever-changing ideal, which is unreachable, like that's a negative thing on women. And to say that that's a form of gender-affirming healthcare makes people think, well, does that mean that trans people are doing the same thing? Like, is the only difference between, like, what's the difference between a trans woman getting breast augmentation and a cis woman getting breast augmentation? Well, they're both called gender affirming healthcare, so presumably not much. And if there's pressures on cis women to look like that, there's pressures on trans women to look like that. And so if I think those pressures are bad, then maybe we should be talking them out of it. And I just feel like that's it's like blending dysphoria in with these like social pressures when they're not the same thing, which could easily confuse people into, like, you do sometimes see people from the like radical feminist side of feminism saying things like, well, trans women also shouldn't get these procedures. And I think it's the difference between like, so kind of rambling a little bit here, but I personally haven't had breast augmentation. I don't think I plan to, but that's because I've been very fortunate to just grow normal sized breasts for my body. It's kind of weird to talk about your own body in this way, but it's true. And if they were a bit smaller, then fine. If I didn't grow any at all, then I'd be very dysphoric about it, because it would just make me feel like it's a male sex indicator to have a flat chest, and it causes me dysphoria, and it did before, and now it doesn't, and it's just like fixed. Like, that doesn't mean I think my boobs are perfect or the ideal size or shape or any of those kinds of things. I know that if I let myself over analyze it, I could find problems with them, and if surgery was permanent, painless, free, effortless, all those kinds of things, then I'd probably do something about it. But I'm not driven to by dysphoria. But there are some trans women who maybe transition quite late, and so their body is less, takes to hormones less, or maybe they have a just a genetic difference where they just don't grow much breast tissue, or maybe they just don't respond to estrogen at all. And I do know some people who have been in that situation, and they just don't grow breasts at all, and that's incredibly distressing for them for dysphoria reasons, not because they're trying to like chase an Instagram look. They're not like, oh, I need to go to the world's best breast surgeon and get them like porn star boobs or whatever people think, Instagram model boobs. They're more like, anything will do. I just want something there so I feel like myself. And again, that's, I think, is the divide between like addressing dysphoria and chasing society's beauty standards. So, for those reasons, sorry, that was a little bit rambly, but I hope it made sense. I guess a summary of the reasons are, it's not a good gotcha. It blends trans people's healthcare in with cis people's healthcare, which hides the fact that they are not coming for gender affirming healthcare. They're coming for trans people. Like, when you say they're attacking trans healthcare, it's very clear who they're going for. And also it like does, from a feminist perspective, confuse things and make it seem like trans people are just transitioning because of gender expectations. I know I have met like some true TERFs, as in trans exclusionary radical feminists, few and far between, but some of them exist. They really do believe that if we ended misogyny, trans people would stop existing, because they think that trans men would stop feeling the need to escape womanhood, and that trans women would have no like beauty ideal to chase. And that's just nonsense, because there's like a biological aspect to transition, to trans people. If we ended sexism and we ended patriarchy, there would still be trans people. They wouldn't fit into binary categories, but then neither would cis people so much. But there would still be trans people. So yeah, I just don't like the term. If you use the term, I'm not coming for you. I'm not cancelling you. It's not terrible. If you are someone who's just written a whole fucking 10,000 word essay about why gender affirming healthcare should be good, should be kept, should be protected, you don't need to go and find and replace it all. If it's a term you prefer, then fine. I just don't think it's a good term, and I think we should just be more explicit about what's going on at all times, and not try and hide things behind what's going on so people get confused about what it means. None of this like nice talk. Transphobes are trying to take away trans people's healthcare. They are not coming for gender affirming healthcare. They're coming for trans people, and that's why we should say that. What do you all think? Do you like the term? Do you think that was even a good explanation of what I was trying to say? It's hard to know. I think I need to go and get another drink. I will be back in 10 seconds. Yeah, I'll go to this one. I'm back, and I have some water. Yeah, that is a good another point. From friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. They also want to get rid of basic, like, healthcare for trans people. So not just trans-specific healthcare for trans people. They also want to make accessing any healthcare for trans people harder. And when you say trans healthcare, that covers all of those things. Whereas when you say gender affirming healthcare, it also doesn't cover those things. Like if you've got asthma and you're a trans person, they also want to make that harder for you to do by giving you the wrong records, calling you the wrong thing, treating your body as if it was biologically and medically different to what it actually is, and giving you the wrong doses of things, looking for the wrong symptoms, all of those kinds of things too. So, absolutely. So Bella's saying, I feel, Katie, that your position seems to have swung in the direction of perhaps we should use transsexual because we're not just changing something ephemeral, we are changing sex characteristics. This is complicated. Let's do this one. Quickly. The terms transsexual and transgender have like a lot of history, both externally and internally within the community. Today, most of the people you encounter who say that they are transsexuals are a combination of things. Some of them are just people who have been using that term to describe themselves for 50 years. That's cool. There are people who that's the term they first encountered and that's what they feel like describes them. That's totally cool. There are also a group of people who are hashtag transsexual, not transgender, who generally spend all of their time hating on non-binary people and coming up with ridiculous arbitrary standards of what a true trans person is and doing nothing but contributing to transphobic harassment of trans people in order to make themselves feel better. And so I don't know how true it is now, but there at least was a time when you encountered someone calling themselves a transsexual, it'd always be a little bit like, are you just someone who likes the term or just who uses the term, or are you one of these fucking elitist dickheads? So I don't use either the term transsexual or transgender because it complicates all of that stuff, and what I'm interested in is ending the oppression of anyone who faces transphobia. And like, even if, like, you know, if I might fit the classic description of a transsexual, which is true, and if I fought to end just the oppression of people like me, the oppression of other trans people or the other people who are like non-binary and stuff would still exist, and it would still be immoral. Like, even if it didn't directly affect me, like I support abortion rights. I'm never going to have an abortion. It doesn't directly affect me. I'm also never going to be on the other side of, you know, contributing to someone having an abortion. So it doesn't directly affect me, but it's immoral to ban abortion. Like, it's just, how can you not have the position of supporting abortion rights? And it's just, like, I'm not a non-binary person. I mean, if they just like what the true transsexuals wanted, if there's something like, right, true transsexuals are having all the human rights and non-binary people are having no human rights. Like, even if that was possible, which it isn't, because actually all the transphobes think that all trans people are exactly the same anyway, and that's why they do transphobia on all of us. They think that, you know, the most caricature version of a sex offender, non-binary, doesn't medically transition, whatever ridiculous stereotype is exactly the same as the most like cis heteronormative trans person in existence. That they don't care, they fucking hate all of you. But even if it was possible to separate trans people, like transsexuals and non-binary people's rights in some way, it would be immoral. Like, I wouldn't support that. Like, what the fuck? I want people to have access to healthcare, like, to control their own bodies. Like, I think that bodily autonomy is like a fundamental principle. Like, I came to that position before I even came out as trans. That was like part of the motivation for me coming out as who I am. Like, to get to the position of, oh yeah, everyone should have control over their own bodies. And actually, people who do take control of their own bodies aren't disgusting. There's not anything wrong with them. It's good and it's a normal position. And like, that applies to disabled people's rights to it, etc. So, yeah, I mean, like, I'm only interested in ending... Well, I'm not only interested in ending transphobia. Obviously, I'm interested in ending misogyny and racism too. But, obviously, the focus of what I talk about is about transphobia. And that just observably does affect trans people who are not like me. And if you want to say, oh, actually, I'm transgender and not transsexual, or actually, I'm transsexual and not transgender, if you're not fighting against me and you know, you're fighting for your own rights, or you're fighting for all trans people's rights, or whatever, fine. That's cool. I don't care. If you're actively hurting other trans people or contributing to transphobia, then fuck you. I'm gonna argue with you all the time. So that's why I think it's complicated. That's why I just say trans. And if someone says, "What are you?" After saying like metalhead and addicted to Pokemon cards and atheist and British, like, eventually I'll get to the point where I'll be like, oh yeah, I am a trans woman. Like, I am a trans person and I am a woman. Cool. But all that said, aside, I do feel like the term transsexual is more literally accurate, because I mean, obviously I did change gender in the sense that I changed my presentation to some degree, and I changed like social category. But like, the motivation for me doing this stuff was to change sex characteristics, because they were causing me like anguish, which I think is a good word. Like, that's what dysphoria is. Well, I don't even really like the term gender dysphoria. I mean, I think there's gender dysphoria and sex dysphoria, and they're both like the same thing, and it should just be called dysphoria. But yeah, I mean, if pressed to describe myself as either transsexual or transgender, I would say, well, probably transsexual, asterisk. By the way, I'm not an elitist shithead, and I actually think all trans people should have human rights. Like, that would probably be my answer to the question. So, yeah, I don't know if that's the majority position. Maybe it isn't. Quite possibly isn't. I do think that the majority of trans people probably prefer the term transgender. Don't know. I think that was probably true in 2016. I don't know if it's true now. But it doesn't matter to me personally. And if you think, Katie, you're being one of these elitist transsexual shitheads, I think you're wrong. Because I genuinely care about fighting for all trans people's rights. But come and discuss it with me. Tell me I'm wrong. I'd love to know. Anyway, we better move on, because I've been doing a whole bunch of ranting. Let's talk about sport. Everyone's favorite topic. So, did I have the actual headline here? I thought I did. Okay, the headline is that World Athletics has announced they're going to do mandatory sex testing for all women who want to compete in their sports. Not the men, just the women. And I just wanted to discuss like why that is terrible. So World Athletics, I just want to, maybe I can find the actual article I was going to discuss. World Athletics sex testing. We'll edit this bit out, hopefully. Here you go. This will do for a headline. No, this won't do for a headline. Gender tests. God, this is, man, people mixing up sex and gender is so frustrating. No wonder people get confused about it. Anyway, okay. World Athletics is enforcing sex testing for all women. And also worth noting, World Athletics has already banned all trans women, full stop, from all their sports. So this isn't even specifically about trans people, but this is exactly what we've been saying would happen. The purity tests on what a real woman is has left the realm of just attacking trans people and is now coming after intersex people and just women in general. There is maybe this idea in the public that a sex test is like they just put a cotton bud in your mouth and then they run it through the sex machine and then it just says, ping, you were born with a vagina, or ping, you were born with a penis. And that's it. Sort people into two easy boxes. What's all the fuss about? All this is going to do is like sniff out the trans people who are trying to run a race, dare to enter park run or something. But that isn't how it works at all. That's not how biology works at all. We actually had these sex tests before in the past. I think it was from the 60s until like 2008 or something. And they were a complete disaster. They didn't work. They ruined a bunch of people's lives. And they dropped them because they just don't work. They used to have them for the Olympics. The Olympics doesn't currently have them. Though the Olympics just had a vote on a new head of the Olympic Commission, and they voted in someone who has flagged some kind of gender critical sympathies. We'll see how bad it is. But one of the guys who could have been the head of the Olympic Commission is Sebastian Coe, who is the head of World Athletics, and he is hardline anti-trans and intersex to an insane degree. So it's good that he's not in charge of the Olympics, but he is in charge of this body, and that's why they're doing this thing. So I just wanted to read out a couple of examples because I think this is a good way of communicating why these things are terrible and they're stories you might not have heard of. So I don't know if I'm going to read all of this. Maybe I will, but like there's a couple of stories here which are just horrific, and these are exactly the kind of things that are going to happen from sex testing. Because when you do sex testing, there is no one flag which says whether someone is male or female, because that isn't how biology works. There's a whole complicated mess of things going on. There's like people often split it into things like chromosomes, genitals, gonads, etc. But even then, within chromosomes, within DNA, there isn't just one thing. You don't just zoom in and see two X's or see an X and a Y. Like those are labels for parts of your DNA, which generally appear in most people. But even within those chromosomes, they have bits which do loads of complicated stuff. And sometimes you get someone who has a Y chromosome, but it doesn't do what most Y chromosomes do, and they are just born cis women. And sometimes you have someone without a Y chromosome, and they've got a bunch of other genes which cause them to develop into a man. And like already that is very complicated. But then on top of those things, if you just have, you might just have typical XY chromosomes or stuff. But if you're doing a sport which benefits from like male puberty and you haven't been through it, then you don't have the benefits of male puberty. The chromosomes themselves don't do anything. Like they don't they are themselves, like, as you run, it's not like the chromosomes themselves are generating power and making you strong or whatever. It's the chromosomes and the aspects within them, individual genes, which are sometimes expressed and sometimes not, contribute to your development in the womb, which then creates things like your gonads, which when you get to the age of puberty, then create hormones, which the hormones then cause various parts of your body, like your bones, your muscles, your tendons, to grow in certain ways, and they are the things which cause athletic advantages based on biology or not. And during that whole process, it's not just a cascade. It's not just if A happens, then B happens. If B happens, C happens. And if C happens, D happens. That is not. It's like there's this whole mess, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. If at least 16 of those things, then it's probably going to go this way, but some of this can contribute to these other things, and crazy mess of stuff going on. But so that's why these like binary just take a swab from someone's mouth tests just cannot work. But like, we don't just need to take my word from it. If you don't understand biology, you're like, that's actually way more simple. Katie's an idiot. Like, let's just read these stories from some of these women who have been affected by it. So here it says, from 1968 to 2000, women's athletes had to undergo genetic testing. From its inception, medical experts questioned the ethics and efficacy of the policy. As an athlete, I believe it added an obstacle to the already demanding course that women had to take to participate in sport. So this is Maria Jose Martinez Patiño, who's Spanish. She was a national champion hurdler, and she was around when they had to do sex tests. So she says, I was born and raised in northern Spain. I had a life of a normal girl, except I had an affinity for running and jumping, which is something, get this, that some girls like to do. I excelled in athletics and competed at national level, but only because of a concentrated effort and training. I was overjoyed to be able to participate in the 1983 World Track and Field Championships in Helsinki. There I passed my first sex test and was given a certificate of femininity. What a disgusting title. Certificate of femininity. Like, oh, you're sufficiently feminine enough. Anyway, that isn't the problem we're talking about. That is a problem. We're not talking about that now. In 1985, I went to the World University Games in Kobe, Japan. Unfortunately, I forgot my certificate, and my smear test for 2 X chromosomes had to be repeated. Later that day, our team doctor told me, in front of the teammates I sat with the night before, that there was a problem with my result. At the hospital the next day, I learned that a sophisticated karyotype analysis would be undertaken and that the results would take months to reach my sports federation in Spain. I would be unable to compete in that day's race. Okay, already this is a problem. If you need to carry this certificate of femininity around and you don't have the certificate and you have to do the test, at least in the 60s or 80s or whenever this is, it took a long time. Even now, you might be like, oh, well, the test is much quicker now. For sure. But you still have to have access to it. What happens if you're running in a race and they don't have a lab to test these things right nearby? You might have to miss out a race. Even that on its own is already bullshit, because she's already got a certificate. She was born a girl. She should be able to compete. Anyway, I'm not saying, by the way, that trans women shouldn't be able to compete. They should, based on certain conditions. Anyway, our team doctor advised me to consult with a specialist when I got home and urged me in the meantime to fake an injury so no one would suspect anything untowards. I was shocked, but I did as I was told. I sat watching my teammates, wondering how my body differed from theirs. I spent the rest of the week in my room feeling sadness that I could not share. My mind spun. Did I have AIDS or leukemia, the disease that had killed my brother? Back in Spain, I began trying to come to terms with what was happening. Growing up, neither my family nor I had any idea I was anything other than normal. I went to the best doctors. I attended all the appointments alone, however, because I hadn't had the heart to tell my parents something was wrong. They were still grieving my brother. And because my federation was at a loss about what to do until the karyotype result came through, 2 months on, the letter arrived. All of the 50 counted cells had 46 chromosomes. The karyotype, sorry, I've been saying it wrong. Karyotype analysis by the Q-banding method revealed her sex chromosome constitution is XY. Karyotype is decided 46XY. I have androgen insensitivity and I don't respond to testosterone. When I was conceived, my tissues never heard the hormonal message to become male. So, this is a cis woman, a woman who was born a girl. She came out of her mum, and the doctor was like, "Congratulations, it's a girl." She then grew up and became a woman, and very clearly did not have any biological advantage from male puberty because she is physically incapable of going through male puberty. She actually does not respond to the hormones which your body would create in order for you to develop into a boy or a man, which is exactly why in the womb she developed into a girl. So this isn't a case of she had testicles and they just didn't cause her to go for male puberty. In the womb, despite her chromosomes typically pointing in one direction, because of all of the other complicated web of things going on during development in the womb, she developed into a girl. As I was about to enter the January 1986 National Championships, I was told to feign an injury and withdraw from racing quietly, graciously, and permanently. I refused. Good for her. When I crossed the line first in the 60-metre hurdles, my story was leaked to the press. I was expelled from our athlete's residence. My sports scholarship was revoked. My running times were erased from the country's athletics. I felt ashamed and embarrassed. I lost friends, my fiancé, hope, and energy. I knew that I was a woman and that my genetic difference gave me no unfair physical advantage. I could hardly pretend to be man. I have a breasts and a vagina. I never cheated. I fought my disqualification. Yeah, so I don't think she ever got an apology. If you want to read the rest of this, I'll put the link in the description. Horrific. This is just such a clear example of why just doing a karyotype test is meaningless. Like you're saying, oh, okay, yeah, this person is XY. And most XY people are men, and most of them have an advantage at sport over women. So that means we're going to ban all people with XY. Doesn't make any sense, because quite literally, the entire reason that she's in this situation where she is a woman who is taking a karyotype test and is being flagged as XY is because she doesn't respond to any of the things that would give her a physical advantage at sport. Like, just factually did not develop into a boy. Literally is more biologically incapable of being a boy than almost every other cis woman. If someone with XX chromosomes was, like, instead of grown in a womb, was grown in a test tube or whatever, and you gave them the right hormone levels and other epigenetic stuff going on, they could develop into a boy. For example, most trans men are able to take testosterone, and it physically changes their body because it forces them to go through male puberty, because their body responds to that. Because all humans, all X chromosomes, of which some people have one and some people have two or more, all X chromosomes contain the full set of instructions to build a man or a woman. So most people, when given testosterone levels of like a puberty, will start developing into a man. This lady cannot. So she couldn't even dope with testosterone or anything, because her body doesn't respond to that. So this is just such a clear, ridiculous result of these kinds of sex testing. And she was just literally just a normal woman who was good at running, and then because of the stigma, her fiance left her. Just ridiculous. So what we're saying is, when you're a girl who likes running, there's a chance that you might be randomly, she couldn't have known. Just, like, randomly, this will happen to some of the women who are forced to take this test. Randomly, you, pal, you failed this test. You're now a man. I mean, you can't compete in sports. Your partner's going to leave you. Your friends will leave you. Like, it's just so horrific. And now what? Also, because of the international hate movement, the gender criticals, this lady shouldn't be able to use the toilet, shouldn't be able to get protection from misogynistic sexism at work if she then goes to work in an office or something. Just ridiculous. But it actually gets worse. Would you believe it? So this is a story from another lady a similar thing happened to, but a much worse fucking grim thing happened. Annette Negesa, a middle distance runner from Uganda, does not know when she first caught the attention of the athletics officials, but the testing began in 2011. First in May, there was a routine urine doping test. In August, when she reached the semi-finals of the World Championships in South Korea, she had blood tests. I was wondering, why me? I didn't see anyone else giving 6 bottles of blood like me. I wonder. She never got the results and continued to train for the 800 and 1500 meters traveling to Europe in early 2012. Then in July, while she was in the final stages preparing to run at the London Olympics, her manager called her and informed her that she could not attend the games. He told me that they took my samples and they think they found in mine that the level of found the level of men's hormones are high. Okay, not the best quote, but they found that they thought that she had male levels of hormones. She told Human Rights Watch, and for that reason they can't accept me to run. She was confused and devastated. Of course. Like, I don't really like sports, but some people, it's their life. If I had to like take some test and they banned me from playing Pokemon cards, I'd be very upset. Like, it's one of the most important things in my life at the moment, and running is to people who are trying to be world class runners. Like, people just gloss over this stuff. Of course it's fucking devastating. Like, it's ruining her life for no reason. Anyway, her manager told her that the doctors from the IAAF, now World Athletics, had said she needed to go to France for a medical appointment. Negesa said, he asked me, you still want to run? I told him yes. He said, then we need to do this. They need us to do this and this. Initially, she understood that possible medical steps would involve taking medication. It was when she travelled to France that she learned about the surgery. A few days later, a National Athletics Federation official contacted her. The official warned her to be discreet. She said, don't move around, just stay at home, because they were fearing of the news, people coming to me and asking me why I didn't go to the Olympics. She stayed low and depressed for months. She told Human Rights Watch that a team of white male doctors and a woman nurse assessed her at a hospital in Nice, in France. Her European manager accompanied her. She described the hospital procedures consistent with a physical exam, an ultrasound, a blood test, and an MRI. She did not receive any documents at the appointments. She was told to visit a doctor in Kampala for surgery. In November, a local federation official... Sorry, this is really grim. I do need to read this. And her local manager took her to the Women's Hospital International Facility Centre there, where a doctor told her he would perform a simple surgery like an injection. She said, but she woke up from anesthesia with scars on her abdomen. She didn't know this was going to happen, by the way. And discharge papers mentioning an orchiectomy, removal of internal testes, and listed a prescription for post-surgical antibiotics. She suffered headaches and achy joints in the years after. In 2023, they reviewed an official from the hospital where she had had the surgery. She said she now complains of body weakness, which attribute to the withdrawal symptoms of the gonadectomy. The letter said they had been restrained from starting her on estrogen therapy, awaiting further discussions with the IAAF's medical advisor. After a painful months-long recovery, she began training again at university, but she never regained her fitness level, and the university cancelled her scholarship at the end of 2013. Her international manager ceased contacting her. Today she lives in Germany, where she was granted asylum. So, this lady, who was a girl when she was born, and grew up to be a woman, who was good at sports, they did a test and they determined you have failed. And they just did not tell her that they were going to do a surgery on her, a belly at all, like an injection. What the fuck? They cut her open, took parts of her body out without explaining what that meant to her. And then when you might not know this, if you're a trans person, you probably do know this. If you remove someone's gonads, so that is ovaries or testicles, or both, gonads are one of the organs in your body which produces hormones, along with your pituitary gland, and maybe others. But they produce the majority of your sex hormones. So they produce most of the testosterone in your body and most of the estrogen in your body. So if you just take them out, you don't have enough of those hormones to function and live a normal, healthy life. So people who have them removed, for whatever reason, cis people and trans people need to have hormones in order to be healthy. For example, I need to have hormones in order to be healthy, and it's fine because I am able to get hold of them. They didn't give her them because they weren't sure what the Athletics Society, that World Athletics would say. So they just didn't give her medicine. Like, that is fucking horrific. And of course she had muscle and joint aches and stuff, because without hormones, your body like doesn't totally stop working. You don't die overnight, but loads of functions of your body do not work properly. And bone weakness, muscle weakness, joint pain are things that happen to people who have this surgery without having hormones given to them. But yeah, like, they've ruined this lady's life. This is an example of like mutilation. When you hear all these gender criticals talking about trans people being mutilated, when trans people are voluntarily doing a surgery which they are informed about and know they have informed consent, and then they get medicine in order to live healthily and happily for the rest of their lives, that counts as mutilation. But when they're just picking up some random woman from another country and just doing a surgery on her without telling her, lying about it, saying it's just like an injection, and then not giving her the hormones, like, horrific. And this is the result of a running thing. Like, for what reason did they ruin her life? They just see her as so disposable that they could just like cut her up and ruin her life over fairness in women's sport, protecting females. Like, fuck off. She was a girl when she was born. That, like, right, there is, whether we like it or not, some level of controversy to trans girls and women in women's sports, to some degree, at some levels. At the elite level, you could say some level of medical transition is required for some sports. I don't think you could argue that for darts or pool, but I think you could argue that for, say, sprinting. Or like the things that the two women we've just looked at do. Putting those aside, we're not even talking about trans women here. We're not talking about the grey area in transition. We're not talking about the fact that like going from a man to a woman or from a woman to a man necessarily involves going through a grey area, and where you draw that line is kind of arbitrary and it's a difficult thing to come up with. We're not talking about that at all. We're just talking about a girl or two girls who were just born a bit different and who happen to be good at sports, and arbitrarily, for no reason at all, a bunch of men has decided that they aren't real girls. They're not really allowed. They have fallen outside of the purity test of what a real woman is, and they're going to ruin their lives over it. Like, this is exactly where this was always going to lead. Like, attacks on trans people and saying what a real woman is was always going to lead to attacking intersex people. Always. And it is not going to stop with sex tests for women athletes and ruining a handful of female athletes' lives. That is going to happen. Some women at the next Olympics, or whenever next World Athletics thing is, are going to fail their tests and not get a femininity certificate, and it's going to ruin their lives, and they'll make news for a day, and that'll be it. But they're going to keep going. Like, why would it stop at the sports? They're going to be these kind of purity tests all the time for all kinds of things. Like, maybe you can argue at the Olympic level we should have some kind of rules on trans women and intersex women in sports. Maybe you can argue that. Fine. But you can't argue that about, like, the local girls' football team for 11-year-olds or whatever, because they're just having fun. It's just their hobby. But they are going to start arguing that. They are going to start demanding genital inspections and, like, what is some poor girl who, like, 16-year-old girl going to do if they start performing surgeries on her without giving her informed consent? Like, it's going to happen. It's already happened. This was literally, like, 10 years ago. This wasn't, like, in the 1920s or some medieval times or some kind of barbaric past. This is within our lifetimes. We've already done exact same mistakes. It's just going to happen again. We're just going to have to watch this happen again. It's going to ruin some women's lives. And you know what? If you grew up and you were slightly more masculine girl, or slightly more, like, bullied for looking like a boy or all this kind of stuff, you might think, I'm good at sports and I like sports, but I don't know if I want to risk finding out something I don't want to know, something completely arbitrary and doesn't change your value at all objectively, but actually a bunch of transphobic, intersexphobic people around you would devalue you because of, like, you're not going to want to enter sport, are you? If you just know that in order to get better at your hobby, you basically just have to roll a dice, and there's like a 1 in 250 or whatever chance that it's going to ruin your life, some people are going to give up before they have to roll the dice, aren't they? So, World Athletics can fuck off. In conclusion, it makes me ill thinking about this. We got to keep going because I've got another couple of things to talk about. And quite a few things to talk about, and I've ranted on a lot. Okay. We'll cover them. We'll cover them. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, let's do some news, I guess. This one's quite depressing. So this is in the UK. The University of Sussex has been fined over £500,000, insane money, in a transgender free speech row. This BBC article is absolutely terrible, written by Branwen Jeffries. Rubbish, obviously a gender critical person. So what's happened here is, you may remember, you may not, there is a gender critical activist, one of the most prominent ones in the UK, called Dr. Kathleen Stock. She holds very extreme views. She has signed the WDI Declaration, which the WDI Declaration itself just straight up calls to remove pretty much every single trans person's rights in the entire country. Pretty much every right we have, from protection from misogyny at work, to access to having a family, to having fair access to jobs, to our healthcare, like everything. She's also, or is, or was, the trustee of LGBT Alliance, which is a group that most people consider a hate group or an anti-LGBT group, and has campaigned with many of the leading gender criticals against trans people's human rights. She used to be the lecturer at Sussex University. She released her book. She came out as gender critical. She's done a load of campaigning, like constantly in the media, campaigning against trans people's rights. So obviously there was loads of protests, and she quit her job. She then claimed that the university was harassing her or whatever, and that the university's policy saying that trans people should be protected from abuse and stuff was stifling free speech. And of course, the Conservative government at the time went all in on that. A chance to attack trans people, a chance to remove hate protections, a chance to like promote bigotry. Of course they were all in on that. And of course, Keir Starmer's Labour government has picked up exactly where they were and has just carried on hating against minorities and particularly trans people. So the new person in charge of this, what even is her role? I can't remember. Bridget Phillipson is obviously just a conservative, an anti-trans activist, has been pushing for this to happen. And they're trying to claim it's some free speech thing. You should be able to be a lecturer at a university and be protected, to have your job protected, like legally unable to fire you if you are campaigning to remove the human rights of some of your students. That's not a freedom of speech thing. That's completely ridiculous to claim it. That's a freedom of speech thing. Like, if you're a teacher and you're campaigning like against women being in schools, you shouldn't be a fucking teacher. If you're someone who doesn't think like Jewish people should have human rights, you shouldn't be a lecturer. Like, because obviously it's going to stifle the free speech of the women, of the Jewish people, of the Muslim people, of whichever group that this hateful preacher is targeting. Like, why imagine that Sussex University backs down on this? Actually, I think Sussex University is going to fight this. Good for them. Let's hope they don't buckle. Just imagine Sussex University is like, right, we're dropping our hate speech stuff altogether. We're going to hire lecturers, a bunch of men who are male supremacists for freedom of speech reasons, and they don't think women should have the right to education or vote. Do you think that women are going to apply for this university? No, of course they aren't. And then, if women don't apply to the university and don't contribute in the higher education discussion at university, do you think they have freedom of speech? No, they don't. So it's taking away their freedom of speech. But not only that, this is an actual example of an academic freedom issue, but in the complete reverse to the way the BBC is trying to present it and the way that the Labour government is trying to present it. Because Sussex University has rightly, but freely, made the decision of which ideologies and anti-science bullshit thing they're going to dismiss. They don't want to hire anti-vaxxers to teach their biology course. They don't want to hire racists to teach their sociology course. Because those ideologies, like scientific racism and anti-vax and phrenology and stuff, academically, I mean, they're immoral, but also academically, they are garbage. And the university should be able to say, you know what, we are actually dismissing flat earthers and we're not hiring a flat earther to run our astrology department. We're not going to actually hire someone who doesn't believe in gravity. Yes, they are real. Some flat earthers don't believe in gravity. We're not going to hire someone who doesn't believe in gravity to run our physics department because those ideologies are wrong. We don't need to debate these. We're dismissing them. We've done that. We discovered gravity hundreds of years ago, actually. So we're not going to have people who don't believe in gravity now. They should be free to do that. That's their academic freedom. That's what academic freedom is. And now we're saying that they're not allowed to dismiss people who believe that sex is an immutable binary, or believe in sex souls, or believe that trans people are subhuman, or they shouldn't have human rights. We've done that. Like, academically, they know that's wrong. So why would they hire someone like that? Of course, the government is putting extreme pressure on them to £500,000. For some reason, 585 and not just 500,000, but crazy amount of pressure on them to drop protections for minority students. I just want to point out, before we move on from this exact article, how terrible this is. Like, absolutely ridiculously written, classic BBC bullshit. So this is their little description of what's going on, praising Dr. Stock. Here she is needing a security guard. Like, she wasn't actually in physical danger. It does make sense they gave her security. I don't disagree with that. Just because when you're a public figure like that who's at the center of protest, then it's good to have a security guard. I mean, just to contrast, I mean, they should also be giving security guards to trans people who come at the center of fire of these like international hate movements. I had extra when I gave a talk at shit, I've forgotten which university. Warwick. When I gave a talk at Warwick University, we received so many threats that I had to have extra security. I just think that's fine. It was unlikely I was ever in physical danger. Probably more likely that I was in physical danger than Dr. Stock, because the anti-trans hate movement is a lot more violent than the pro-LGBT rights one, but it seems reasonable. Anyway. Here they are describing why she was at the center of this protest. Professor Stock faced protests on the university campus after she published a book questioning whether gender identity was more socially significant than biological sex. That's it. That's the explanation of someone who has like openly been campaigning to remove trans people's rights, who has signed a public declaration calling to remove all of trans people's rights, who's the trustee at an anti-LGBT group which focuses entirely on removing trans people's human rights, including wanting to repeal the Gender Recognition Act and remove us from the Equality Act. And we get this like, oh, she just dared to question whether gender identity was more socially... No, she didn't. What the fuck are you talking about? You absolute loser. Bramwell Jeffries is not on Blue Sky. I did reply to her on Twitter. If you want to go and like my reply, you're welcome. Anyway, so here's an article by Helen Belcher, who's a Liberal Democrat politician, just calling out about this. Oh no, this is a different article. Oh goodness, sorry. Okay, I've got these in the wrong order. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. Anyway, so of course, we get some bullshit from Bridget Phillipson. Universities must be places of open debate, not censorship. We're giving the regulator stronger powers to ensure students and academics are free to speak, debate, and challenge ideas without fear. When it comes to trans people, but do you know what she said just recently? In fact, 1 year ago, almost exactly. No, not even 1 year ago, May, sorry. Universities must ensure Jewish students feel safe on campus, which I agree with, by the way. That's been made harder by the Tories, who have stopped universities from no platforming those who spread hate. There must be no place for anti-Semitism in universities or anywhere else. Which, again, there shouldn't. Why is it... Like, if we just read this exact thing out about a different group... Universities should ensure women students feel safe on campus. This has been made harder by the Tories, who have stopped universities from no platforming those who spread hate. There must be no place for sexism in universities or anywhere else. That's true, right? That's equally true. Universities must ensure gay students feel safe on campus. That's been made harder by the Tories, who have stopped universities from no platforming those who spread hate. There must be no place for homophobia in universities or anywhere else. Why is... Like, in 1 year, why have you totally flip-flopped on this to the point of, actually, now we are saying universities can't no platform hate. We're saying that universities don't have the academic freedom to dismiss anti-science nonsense ideologies like phrenology or gender critical. It's because trans people are at the centre, of course, that is probably the main motivation. But also it's just this right-wing government becoming more and more right-wing, clamping down on academic freedom, taking away people's protection from hate speech and stuff. Like, obviously gearing up to try and do some challenge on the Equality Act. Yeah, ridiculous. Bridget Phillipson is a fucking clown. If you are in her constituency, you should... post her this and this next to each other, pointing out how ridiculous it is. You should point out that she is attacking academic freedom. Do not let the gender criticals get away with this, like, it's free speech versus trans people's feelings. That is not the situation at all. This is free speech and trans and gay and female and people of colour's safety and ability to participate and academic freedom freedom of speech. Can't remember if I said that one twice. And like what is just academically true versus gender criticalism and hate movements in general. That is the actual dichotomy going on here, not the false one that they're trying to present. So, as usual, there are a bunch of people in Labour who are just anti-trans, and it's bad for everyone. As an academic, can I point out that academic freedom is not the same thing as free speech absolutism? It means the freedom to discuss ideas with academic merit. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're like, oh, maybe we should see if Hitler was right all along, there has no academic merit because the answer is very trivially no. You're not being silenced if the university lets you go if you want to make that your PhD. Like, it's a garbage ideology. If you were trying, like, I just don't think people would have any problem seeing this. If you are a physicist and you're like, my PhD is going to be gravity is fake, and you presented it to your supervisor or whatever, they're going to be like, oh, you're an idiot. You're not good enough to be on this course. We're letting you go. Waste of time, waste of money. You shouldn't be here. Because that's true. If you don't think gravity is real, then you're a fucking idiot. And it's the same here. If you're like, my PhD, my lecture subject, my thing is going to be trans people shouldn't have human rights, sex is an immutable binary, then like, no, you're an idiot. That's wrong. So why would we waste our time and money on you? Why should you be able to give lectures here teaching something that is harmful, is offensive, is all of those things, but is also just factually false and bigoted? Ridiculous. So the next thing, God, there's a few things. We've got to do another fucking Wes Streeting thing, and we're gonna do one more ranty thing. Let's do that first, and then we go. Man, all I'm doing today is ranting and talking about fucking Wes Street. I hate him, and I'm sure you do too, and I'm sure probably his own parents do too, because he's such a fucking gremlin. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a little bit difficult, but I do think that it's worth saying something about. So you may remember last year, Brianna Ghey was a 16-year-old schoolgirl who was brutally murdered by her classmates for being trans. She was just a normal girl, just living her life, and they killed her because they bought into transphobic fear-mongering and transphobic ideologies and gender critical and all that rubbish from the internet. And obviously, Brianna Ghey's mum, Brianna Ghey's mum was a supportive person, supportive of her transition, sounded like a nice person, and obviously is grieving and despairing a lot. And I think that she's right to do that and should be given space to do that. And we should hear what she has to say. And I'm not like coming for her. I don't think she's an anti-trans activist. I don't think she's a bad person. I do think she's wrong in this particular thing that she's decided to make her political focus in the fallout of this thing. So Brianna Ghey's mum calls for social media ban for under 16s. Esther J describes social media as an absolute cesspit. True. At the screening of a film exploring her teenage daughter's murder. God, that must be so fucking hard to watch a film about your teenage daughter's murder. My God, that makes me feel ill just thinking about. Like, that is so grim. Good on her for attending, I guess, or for having the guts to do it. So, the mother of the murdered teenager, Brianna Ghey, said that under 16 should be banned from social media. She travels to the US and speaks with an insider who tells her that people are defenseless against the algorithms of social media companies. She was killed by these two losers who are both 15 and attended the same school as her. Stabbed 28 times, fucking horrific. Here she is. They were partly motivated by her transgender identity. It was transphobic murder. Celebrates her life. Okay. Right. So here's the social media part. Brianna had thousands of followers on TikTok, struggled with her mental health, which was worsened by accessing eating disorder and self-harm content on X, Twitter. From the age of 14, one of her killers enjoyed watching videos of real killing and torture on the dark web, fantasized about murder, and developed an interest in serial killers. So, what we have here is a young girl who struggled with mental health and used social media, and by the sounds of it, did access some negative things. And one of the killers who wasn't using social media, or probably was using social media, but here they are highlighting the fact that they used the dark web or accessing videos of murders or whatever, which wouldn't be on social media, or maybe they'll be on Twitter now, but wouldn't be on social media, most of them at the time. What I want to point out is that teenagers I didn't have what we have as social media today, so I am a little bit ignorant about what it is to grow up being a teenager with social media. I can imagine that it is stressful. What we had, 36 years old, everyone, what we had when I were little was MSN Messenger. MSN Messenger caused me a lot of distress, and I think now if I heard the little boom sound of like logging on, I'd probably have a panic attack. I didn't have a good experience with MSN. I am sure that it is terrible and stressful to be a teenager with social media. If I had kids, I would try and teach them how to be responsible with it and advise them against using it. Certainly advise them against using it publicly. But I also appreciate that teenagers need space to communicate with each other and stuff. And especially when they're a trans person, they need a support network. Like, when you're growing up, it's important to have friends and people who support you. And that's hard enough. For a lot of kids, that is really hard. But if you're a trans person growing up in the time of, like, international media attacks and your own fucking government attacking you, and then you look around and no one in your class is trans, no one knows what's going on. Like, it's hard enough for me as a 36-year-old adult. Like, it is genuinely distressing a lot of the time, and I have to call up my trans friends and stuff sometimes and just like say how terrified I am to them. And I gained my trans contacts through social media. Like, that is where my support network for trans people comes from. I don't have many trans friends who I see regularly in my day-to-day life. That's because I'm transphobic and I hate trans people. No, it's just because we're few and far between. There aren't many of us. We don't, we're just, the only thing I've got in common with trans people is that that I'm trans. So that doesn't mean they have the same hobbies as me, same job as me, same social circles, anything. But I think it's important to have a social network, and where else are you going to get it from? Like, that's one of the reasons why trans people are able to campaign for our human rights at all, is because we're able to meet up, discuss with each other, say our horrific experiences, and come together and support each other and organize. On the other hand, if you're the kind of fucking freak who's watching torture videos on the internet, like, you're not watching them on social media. A social media ban wouldn't stop that. But I don't think, like, it's not, like, I think it would be negative for trans girls like Brianna if they were banned from social media, because what support network would they have? I mean, it's great that Brianna's mum was supportive. Lots lots of trans kids do not have supportive parents, do not have a supportive family, don't have supportive friends. And if they don't have a support network, then they are in a bad place. I just do not know how some people survive. And a lot don't. That is itself kind of bad, I think. I wouldn't support this. I don't think it's evil, terrifying. It's not like we're streeting banning puberty blockers going to ruin trans people's lives. I don't think it's a directed attack on trans people. I don't really support this. But I understand where she's coming from. Social media is a cesspit. It can be harmful. Like the fact that Twitter and Facebook and stuff have pro anorexia groups and stuff is horrific, and that should be removed from their platforms. Like they should put more effort into policing this stuff, and also parents should be aware that they can't police all of it, and it's not great. It is a little bit Wild West. So I do agree with her motivations to some degree, but what frustrates me the most, and maybe this is me being overly critical, and I guess I'm sorry to her for this take, because maybe it's just a bit of a dickhead take, but the thing that contributed to Brianna's murder is the transphobic atmosphere in which we live. Like the politics around us, the media, newspapers like The Guardian, which we're reading this in now, the BBC, politicians like Wes Streeting and Kemi Badenoch, like these fucking celebrities who are shitting on trans people all the time. They're the reason that this stuff happened. The reason that hate crimes against trans people has gone up 5 times in 5 years is because of transphobic propaganda, not because of social media. Like social media obviously is the vessel for lots of these attacks, and it's where some people get radicalized and all this kind of stuff. But the people getting radicalized are 16-year-olds. I mean, some of them are 16-year-olds, but most of them are adults. It's the people it's like Wes Streeting. It's like Liz Truss. It's like, the actual politicians leading the country. It's the people who are the editors at The Guardian and The Observer and The Telegraph and The Times and Daily Mail, who are making up lies about trans people and platforming these hate preachers constantly week after week to write lies about trans people. They are the reason that hate crimes are up so high and have contributed to why Brianna got murdered. And this is I think if you're I got to be careful to communicate this in the right way. I think if your child is murdered, you don't owe anyone anything. You're not obliged to become a political campaigner. You're not obliged to confront the people responsible for the hate mongering, etc. If you have this horrific thing happen to you and then you just disappear from the public eye, fine. That is great. I want you to live the best life you can considering your horrific circumstances. But if you have a raised media presence and you are doing political campaigning like this, like having your face published in the media and getting a chance to have an article about you, why aren't you campaigning against the actual problem? She could even do both. She could say, I think it's unhealthy for kids to have social media, but also the transphobic atmosphere at the moment pushed by hateful politicians and hateful media editors is the reason why we're in this mess. That would be more positive. I don't know. I can imagine that a lot of trans people will be frustrated with this. I don't really think it's positive for the trans community. I don't really I don't hate Esther for it. I understand it's just a terrible situation. I think it's not great, and maybe she's about to do something else too. Maybe this makes me a dickhead person for going. I really don't want to come across like I'm going after her. I just felt like the need to talk about this, and I just wish that people who have energy for fighting for trans people would use it to fight for trans people and not to fight some other proxy war, which is not helpful. I don't know. What do you guys think? Because this is a bit of a difficult one. Like, if you want to write in the comments, like, Katie, you're so off base on this one. This is a really insensitive, self-centered take. Then tell me. I'm willing to hear a pushback from this, but I have written about it a few times, and I haven't really seen an argument that changes my mind on this. But I'm totally willing, and I do support Esther J, and yeah. Feedback in the form of a shit video. Right, we've got one more thing to cover, then I'm calling it a day. So we are going to talk about, quite briefly, I think. We'll see. So, the gender criticals, the anti-trans movement, and the British government have a new review. You thought you were sick of the CAS review, which disagreed with the international medical community. Well, we've got another stupid review led by someone who hates trans people to talk about all the time. We have the Sullivan Review. Hooray! Isn't it so exciting? We've got to learn the surnames of all these shitheads. So, the previous government commissioned a review of sex and gender and statistics and like government records, and they commissioned a hardline anti-trans extremist basically to do this review. She's a key member in the gender critical movement, has real hardline gender critical views. This isn't like, she's way worse than Dr. Cass. Baroness Dr. Hilary Cass was like gender critical sympathetic and not an expert at all on the issue, and just blundered in and made a mess, and has since not really, she's not J.K. Rowling basically. Alice Sullivan is an extremist, and just I wouldn't be surprised if she had signed the WD Declaration. I couldn't say either way. I do not know. Yeah, in my opinion, anyway, she holds extreme views on trans people, and like the result of this report is quite extreme. She's basically said that we should completely ignore trans people's actual sex, that how they view themselves, how they function in society, and we should just record birth sex for everything. That was the, like, she was always going to write that going in, because that's her ideology, and that's what obviously come out of this report. Complete waste of time. But this is an article that I accidentally mentioned earlier by Helen Belcher, who is a Liberal Democrat politician. So it's quite a good article. So she does bring up a good example here. So she says, roughly 5 years ago, the NHS COVID-19 app launched. At the time, it seemed as though men were getting the virus more severely than women. It was that which led to the then unprecedented sex at birth question being one of those you had to answer before progressing to other functionality. After a while, it became apparent that estrogen was an important factor in protection from COVID. This meant that trans women, who tend to take estrogen, had a diagnostic pattern similar to other women, meaning that the at birth of the question had been rendered redundant. So, I remember this happening in real time when it first came out that men were affected more, and all the gender criticals were like, how the trans women are going to be affected more? Like, I hope they suffer. And we weren't, because, like, the majority of things which have sex differences, which are medicines and diseases, it's more related to hormones and the actual sex characteristics you have, rather than your chromosomes, which don't really do anything. But obviously Alice Sullivan has said we shouldn't record trans people's actual sex. We shouldn't take into account their hormones or anything. Even for medical stuff, it should just be sex at birth, which would make no sense. In this case, it hid the data. When they started demanding sex at birth, some trans... I mean, I just click female because fuck them. But some trans women would have clicked male. It would have just muddied the data. If they had just explicitly asked in the first place, like they can get a lot of extra data. Like, no, I'm not, you know, often I'm saying this is important for trans people's health. This is important for trans people's health. But when you're collecting data on something like a pandemic that's new, like COVID-19 was, if you had a separate part for trans people, you would gain a lot of data because you could say, oh, what was your sex at birth and what is your sex now and what medications are you taking and what are your hormone levels and all this kind of stuff. You could have a little extra bit for trans people, and they would have much more quickly come to the conclusion that it was estrogen that was a factor because they would have collected that data. Like, trans people are good data points, way more valuable than cis people when you're trying to distinguish which parts of sex affect which medical conditions and treatments. But the gender critical movement explicitly wants to hide that. They want to make the data worse. They want to make healthcare for you worse, whether you're trans or cis, because their ideology is more important to them than anything else. So yeah, it says that's not the finding of the recently studied Sullivan report, according to Sex and Gender. Sullivan, whose research to date has been largely into literacy rates around the UK, was gifted the accolade of gender specialist by then Secretary of State Michelle Donnellan. Despite, or maybe because, her opponent at both the 2017-2019 general elections was me, Donnellan seems to have bought totally into conservative culture wars and was appointed a key player in the gender critical movement to head up this review. I don't know how true it is that Helen Belcher is the catalyst for an extremist in my opinion, being put in charge of this review, but who knows? Maybe it was. Could well have been a factor. Gender critical people are usually petty, pathetic people, so quite possibly. Sullivan states boldly that all research should ask about biological sex, and another term which has no clear definition in science or law, regardless of how you were born, relevant to the topic being investigated. She takes issue with what seems like a perfectly reasonable set of questions in an NHS staff survey, matching a trans-inclusive way of capturing relevant data. Yeah, if you do this, if you only record sex at birth, you will just hide some data, and you will make trans people's healthcare worse and everyone else's healthcare worse. Anyway, we got this article's pretty good. I'll put it in the description. We also got this is a press release from Feminist Gender Equality Network and Transsexual. They're quite strong-worded with this, which is rare for these organizations, because they try and obviously they're doing a politics. So they need to say things like, they can't be as truthful and blunt as me, basically. When I say this is garbage, they say this is potentially harmful. I'm not coming for either of these groups. They're both great. I support both of them, and I know the people in them. But, when they say strong things, it shows how extreme the situation is, because they refrain from saying strong things a lot of the time. So it says, Transsexual, together with FGen, today rejected the conclusion of a report on data collection by Alice Sullivan as biased, inadequate, and potentially harmful to all citizens of the UK, whether trans or not. They're calling for them to reject the report. These recommendations would do nothing to support the government's stated objectives regarding equality and diversity, nor on data use. It represents a deviation from the government's stated position and will be a U-turn should it be implemented. Yes, rooted in the factually incorrect assertions about the binary nature of sex and gender and antipathy towards trans people, despite lip service towards respect for gender identities. Yeah. Anyway, this review is trash. You're probably going to hear more about it, because guess what? Our favourite dickhead, Wes Streeting, almost tweets about nothing apart from trans people. Straight away, pow. Has he talked about any of the other stuff going on with healthcare in the UK? No, of course not. If you go on his timeline, this is like the last thing he said, basically. The Sullivan review underlines the importance of recording biological sex, not just for research and insight, but for patient safety. Doing so does not prevent us from recording, recognizing, and respecting people's gender identity where these differ. We'll act on findings, like straight in there. Like Wes Streeting is a gender critical activist. He hates trans people. He's a dickhead. Like unambiguously. It's just wrong. Like they commissioned a gender critical activist and to determine what was good for trans people's safety. Get fucked. Like absolute joke. If you cared about trans people's safety, you would have involved trans people who were explicitly not involved in this at all, not even consulted. And you would involve experts on trans people's healthcare, which were not included in this at all, and not an activist who's an expert in literacy rates. Yeah, just so transparently a sham. In fact, recording, as we've talked about a few times on this show before, and mentioned earlier in the last few weeks worth of videos, if you come back and watch, if you record trans people as their birth certificate at birth, man, my brain's turning off. If you record trans people as their birth sex rather than their actual sex, then they will lose out. Their healthcare will be affected negatively. They will miss out on treatments, screenings, medical conditions, everything which affect people because hormones are way more likely to be the factor in sex differences between those things than chromosomes are, as are gonads and genitals and all these other things. They don't care. He is lying. Wes Streeting hates trans people. None of this the only difference between the Conservatives and Labour today, or the only difference at least between Kemi Badenoch and Wes Streeting, is Kemi Badenoch says we should harm trans people and also I hate trans people, and Wes Streeting says we should harm trans people and also I care a lot about trans people's identity. That's it. No other difference. He is directly, actively, knowingly campaigning to cause us harm, and he is trying to do some little, I support trans people. Do not let him get away with this. He fucking hates you. If you're an LGBT person, he is campaigning against your health. But this is our one good news item of the week, directly related to this. So, the European Court of Justice, which is like the highest court in the land, and does affect us in the UK, despite Brexit, came out with a ruling on the same day, I think, as... No, a few days before, a week before. I found out about it on the same day. Came out with a ruling about this very thing, interestingly enough. An Iranian trans man fled Iran and got refugee status in Hungary. Yeah, Hungary is terrible for LGBT rights, so that shows how bad Iran is. Anyway, they says although they were born female, their identity is male. Following the recognition of their refugee status, that person was nevertheless registered as female in the asylum register, which is kept by the Hungarian authority. Basically, they sued, took this case all the way to the top. And basically, they have ruled that they're not allowed to do that. And even so, Hungary has no way of officially changing. Pardon me. Hungary has no way of officially changing your legal sex, and the European Court of Justice has said, we don't care. Even if you don't have an official way, every person, trans or cis, has the right to change and correct their data that you've collected, and therefore this person must be able to update their data to be correct. And the law that they've used is GDPR. So if you work in a company, you've probably heard of GDPR before. I don't even know what GDPR stands for. General Data Protection Regulation is basically the law which stops like insane people like Elon Musk stealing all of your data. It stops them collecting things to harvest your data to sell to advertising agencies and stuff in Europe, and everyone covered by the European Court of European Court of Justice is protected by this. In the UK, we are in GDP is something we have to follow. GDPR is something we have to follow. And yeah, they're ruling that you can't record the wrong data and prevent people from updating it. So this ruling, which the UK government is bound by, already the week before the Sullivan review even came out, has totally undermined this entire thing. Trans people legally, by European law, should be allowed to update their medical records to have the correct data. You also might have heard that the NHS has deleted the page on updating your medical records. Let me see if I can just find it, because I did have it up. Yeah. You can still access it in the Internet Archive. Tells you how to update your stuff. I can imagine that West Reading is going to try and ban trans people from doing this or something. There's probably going to have to be a lawsuit, and it's probably going to have to go all the way up, and they will lose it because the European Court of Justice has already ruled on this. So, yeah, you're probably going to hear about the Sullivan review loads from all of these stupid anti-trans dickheads like Wes Streeting and the person we were talking about earlier, Bridget Phillipson. But they're wrong. They are pushing something which is against the law. You have a right to change your records. Do not back down if they try and stop you. And yeah, just brace for some bullshit. But it's good to know that the top level court in the land is ruling strongly in our favour. There's a lot of discussion about GDPR in the chat. UK has enacted GDPR in law, as UK GDPR is derived from EU law, and so the UK courts would be minded to observe. Another EUW. UK GDPR doesn't have to align 100% with the EU GDPR under the Brexit agreement. Sure, but this is quite major. I mean, you never know. The UK can do any kind of bullshit they want. I mean, like, it's the same with Hungary. Hungary's already lost in court over similar things to this. They already lost in court a couple of years ago, saying trans people should be able to update the documents. They're still trying it. I mean, what really can anything do? This is all just like custom and procedure. If the authoritarians in charge say otherwise, then get fucked. But yeah, anyway, as you can tell from my last tripping over my tongue in the last segment, I'm getting tired. It's 10:20. I'm calling it here. Yeah. Critical Cupcake saying, okay, before you go, make sure you hit like and wish Katie a huge happy birthday. You can just do one of those things if you like. Maybe you can just click the like button. I'll take them all as happy birthdays. Thanks everyone for hanging out. So I won't be back at the same time next week, 8 p.m. live, as I normally am. I will be the week after. Next week, I'm having a break. There will be videos on YouTube every single day, so still come back and check out the videos. There should be some. If you haven't watched the whole way through every single live stream, there'll be some stuff you haven't seen for sure. And even if you do watch all the live streams, maybe you just want to come back and read your own comments in the chat as they scroll past. But yeah, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. So the time I will be back, for anyone interested, will not be the 2nd of April. It will be the 9th of April. We will be back at 8 p.m. UK time, and I will have some stories to tell. Yeah, see you all soon, and bye.